What happens when the cheers of the world go silent and all that remains is solitude? Seal once held the world in the palm of his hand, with chart-topping songs, a voice that captivated millions, and a love story the world admired. Yet, beneath the music and his bright smile, something darker always lingered. Why did Seal vanish so suddenly from the spotlight? What private struggles did he endure as the cameras flashed and fans chanted his name? How did a man who once filled entire stadiums end up in quiet isolation, haunted by things unseen by the world? What truly happened to Seal after the fame defied all expectations, and reshaped everything we thought we knew about him? There was a time when roaring crowds and sold-out venues followed Seal wherever he went. His voice was legendary, capable of stopping people in their tracks. But today, that noise has faded into something much quieter, a far cry from the life he once knew. Seal has faced tough realities, and they didn't just appear in recent years. Even his early life was filled with emotional hardships and painful experiences that would shape him long before the world heard his voice. Born in 1963 to Nigerian and Brazilian parents, Seal's early life was anything but stable. His full name, Seal Henry Olusegun Olumide Adeola Samuel, reflects a rich cultural heritage, but that didn't protect him from the harsh challenges of growing up. From the beginning, life pushed him in many difficult directions. His parents, both young and financially struggling, were rarely consistent figures in his life. Money was scarce, and stability was even harder to find. Not long after his birth, Seal was placed into foster care by his parents, a decision that left deep emotional wounds long before his physical scars were visible. He spent his earliest years with a foster family in Paddington, London. For a time, life there felt somewhat normal. The foster home offered a sense of safety and calm that his birth parents couldn't provide. Yet even in this relative peace, Seal felt out of place. There was always a quiet understanding that he didn't truly belong. Knowing he had been given away followed him like a shadow, planting a constant sense of detachment that would stay with him well into adulthood. At age 4, he was returned to live with his biological parents, and things became more difficult. His mother, struggling emotionally and financially, found it hard to reconnect with the child she had once let go. Their bond was tense from the start. Love existed between them, but it was often buried under misunderstandings, unmet needs, and emotional distance. His father was a much stricter figure. Stories from Seal's youth suggest a home where discipline often crossed the line, and fear became a daily reality. Seal once described his childhood as being about survival rather than comfort, and it was evident. While other children learned to dream, Seal learned to prepare for disappointment. The instability, isolation, and longing for a sense of safety didn't just define his childhood, they helped shape the artist he would later become. Even after reaching the peak of musical success, he quietly searched for the same kind of love he had never received from his parents or even from his fans. He once reflected, "People tell me they like my music, that is phenomenal. It's like the love I always wanted from my parents. The love I wanted my father to show me, the kind where he puts his arm around me and says, 'Seal, you did a great job.'" But that kind of affection never came from his father, not even on his deathbed. Seal's interest in music began when a primary school teacher encouraged him to sing and had him perform in front of his parents at a school concert. From that moment, music became much more than a hobby, it became a lifeline. It was where he could pour all the emotions he wasn't allowed to express as a child, the anger, the sadness, the deep yearning to be seen and loved without conditions. In school, he was different, not loud or outgoing, but observant and emotionally tuned in. He quietly took in the world around him, storing every feeling deep within. That emotional sensitivity became one of his greatest gifts. You can hear it in his music, in the way his voice strains and breaks at just the right moments, as if he's reliving every heartache with his audience. After bouncing between homes and surviving a turbulent adolescence, Seal didn't jump straight into a music career. He actually studied architecture for a while, a practical decision, made more out of necessity than passion. Dreams, after all, felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. To support himself, he worked odd jobs and hustled wherever possible to keep going. Still, music simmered under the surface, waiting to rise. He began his journey by singing in local clubs, supporting smaller bands, and doing anything he could just to get on stage. Even in those early days, his voice, though still unpolished, had an undeniable pull. People didn't just listen, they experienced it. It stood apart from the upbeat, sugary pop songs that ruled the airwaves in the late 1980s. Seal's sound came from a deeper, more emotional place, filled with pain, resilience, and hope. His big break came when he joined the British funk band Push. Touring with them gave him his first real taste of life as a musician. More importantly, it took him beyond the limits of London. He ventured through Asia, lived rough, sang in backstreet clubs, and slept wherever he could. These raw and challenging experiences shaped him. Every heartbreak, every indifferent crowd, every lonely night added layers to his character and, eventually, to his music. By the time Seal returned to England in the late 80s, he was no longer just another struggling artist. He had grown into someone with rare depth, an artist with authenticity. Then in 1990, destiny intervened. He met producer Adamski, who had just completed a track called Killer. Seal added vocals to the song, and it became a massive hit almost instantly. Killer wasn't just successful, it was a cultural moment. It topped the UK charts and introduced his haunting, powerful voice to a huge audience. This one song opened doors Seal once thought permanently shut. In 1991, he released his debut solo album, Seal, produced by the renowned Trevor Horn. The album was a powerful mix of emotional intensity and musical diversity, blending R&B, soul, rock, and electronic sounds. Songs like Crazy delivered a beautiful sense of chaos, while others exposed his emotional core. What truly set Seal apart was that he wasn't trying to imitate anyone. His music, appearance, and presence carried the weight of someone who had endured more than most could imagine. That authenticity captivated listeners. His difficult childhood, marked by abandonment, struggle, and complicated love, had taught him how to survive and how to connect with people in a profound way. Seal rose to international fame quickly. Awards came. So did sold-out shows. But behind the scenes, beyond the spotlight and soaring performances, he was quietly fighting a much more personal and painful battle, one that had started long before the world knew his name. To audiences, his voice had the power to shake stadiums, but inside, he was dealing with a harsh medical reality, including the illness that caused the prominent scarring on his face. Seal's health issues began in his early 20s with a diagnosis of discoid lupus erythematosus, a form of lupus that primarily affects the skin, causing painful and disfiguring lesions. Unlike systemic lupus, which attacks internal organs, this form left permanent scarring on his face. These scars eventually became a recognizable part of his image, but at first, they were a source of deep pain. As a young man already trying to find his identity, the scars made life even more difficult. Children and even adults often stared or made unkind comments. Many didn't understand what lupus was, let alone why someone so young bore such visible marks. He became an easy target for ridicule and judgment, which hurt more than the disease itself. He later spoke about how the scars made him feel, not uniquely artistic, but broken, invisible, and unsure if anyone would ever look past them to see who he truly was. The struggle wasn't just emotional, the physical toll was equally intense. Discoid lupus came with lifelong symptoms. Fatigue followed him everywhere. Even during moments of triumph on stage, there were days when simply getting out of bed felt insurmountable. Joint pain would strike without warning, limiting his movement and draining his energy. For someone whose work demanded constant travel, performance, and creative output, this condition was an unrelenting adversary. There was no way to schedule around it. The fatigue and pain came when they pleased, a silent shadow he carried with him no matter how brightly the spotlight shone. Seal persevered through the demands of fame, giving interviews and traveling, while battling a body that often felt like it was turning against him. Despite this, he stayed silent for years about his condition. He didn't seek sympathy or offer excuses. Instead, he bore the burden quietly, pouring every bit of pain and frustration into his music. When Seal sang of love, heartbreak, pain, and redemption, it wasn't just lyrical, it was drawn from real-life experience. Each powerful note carried the weight of personal battles that most fans never knew he was fighting. Still, Seal never allowed lupus to define him. He once shared that the illness taught him resilience, forcing him to understand early on that perfection is a myth, and that true beauty, strength, and success are born from struggle, not ease. The scars he once wanted to conceal became central to his story. They made him stand out, unforgettable, and ultimately, proud. He once remarked, "Something that had kind of been initially traumatizing turned out to be something that has made me instantly recognizable. I quickly realized this body is not who we are. I got off lightly." In an industry obsessed with appearances, Seal's choice to wear his scars openly was bold. He didn't try to fit into the mold of a pop star, he shattered it entirely. His visible difference and authenticity struck a deep chord with fans. But even as he embraced acceptance, the struggle with lupus remained, playing out quietly behind the scenes. He had to adapt, slowing down, tuning into his body's signals, and guarding his energy, even when the world demanded more than he could give. The toll lupus took wasn't just physical, it left emotional marks as well. Growing up with a visible illness shaped how Seal saw himself and the world around him. He came to understand rejection in a deeply personal way, not just in love, but in being judged for his appearance before even speaking. This gave his music an emotional depth that few others could match. But lupus wasn't his only battle. Seal also faced mental health challenges. He revealed that he's dealt with anxiety and panic attacks for decades. It all started in a recording studio, when a sudden and overwhelming panic attack hit him so hard he thought he was dying. He was rushed to the hospital and later diagnosed. Reflecting on his struggles with mental health, Seal said, "It's given me such empathy and understanding for people who can't get help." He stressed the importance of speaking up and seeking support, whether from a therapist or a friend. He believes these conversations need to happen without shame or guilt. Beyond the physical and emotional challenges, Seal also faced deep personal heartbreak, particularly in love, marriage, and divorce. For a while, it seemed like he had finally found his happy ending. After years of grappling with illness, childhood trauma, and a sense of not belonging, love arrived like a spark, and her name was Heidi Klum. Seal and Heidi met in the early 2000s in a New York City hotel lobby, a meeting that felt like it was straight from a romantic film. Heidi, a German supermodel and television icon, was already globally known. Seal, with his soul-stirring voice and commanding stage presence, was at the peak of his music career. Just 5 weeks after their first encounter, they went on their first date. At the time, Heidi was pregnant with her daughter Lenny, from a previous relationship that had ended painfully. But Seal didn't hesitate, he stepped into Heidi's life fully, supporting her through the pregnancy and loving Lenny as his own from the very beginning. To Heidi, Seal wasn't just a partner, he was a source of safety and proof that lasting love could be real. For Seal, Heidi was everything he had longed for: family, stability, and unconditional love. In an interview, he confessed how certain he felt that Heidi was the one early in their relationship, saying, "We didn't have time for the usual premarital dance that couples get into, for the first time in my life. I was completely clear about what I wanted in the relationship and knew exactly what steps to take." They eventually tied the knot in May 2005 on a beach in Mexico, surrounded by close friends and family. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and intimate, just the way they envisioned it. For Seal, it marked the beginning of a new chapter that felt almost unreal in its happiness. They soon created a family together. Seal formally adopted Lenny, giving her his surname, and together they had 3 more children, 2 sons, Henry and Johann, and a daughter, Lou. Their home was lively, noisy, and full of energy. For someone like Seal, who had grown up in foster care and experienced instability, it felt like a dream realized. He had finally built the kind of loving family he had once only imagined during the darkest moments of his youth. Their love was not only deeply personal but also publicly celebrated. Every year, they renewed their vows in elaborate, romantic ceremonies, sometimes just with family, other times with close friends. It became a cherished ritual, almost like an annual affirmation of their bond. Speaking about it, they once said, "It's so special to us, something we love and something our children have gotten accustomed to." It's like, hey, mom and dad love each other and they get married every year. The public was equally captivated. Seal and Heidi appeared to be the perfect couple, beautiful, talented, famous, and most importantly, deeply in love. Yet behind the glossy images and glamorous appearances, subtle cracks began to show. What started as faint and almost imperceptible signs eventually grew into fractures that even the strongest love couldn't mend. By 2012, the storybook romance came to an end. Seal and Heidi surprised fans and the world by announcing their separation, citing irreconcilable differences. In a joint statement, they shared, "While we have enjoyed 7 very loving, loyal, and happy years of marriage, after much soul-searching, we have decided to separate. We have had the deepest respect for one another throughout our relationship and continue to love each other very much, but we have grown apart." The news was hard for fans to believe. How could a couple who appeared so devoted, who renewed their vows each year, and who had built such a beautiful life together, suddenly part ways? But for Seal, the heartbreak ran much deeper than public perception. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the collapse of a life he had worked tirelessly to build. Having grown up without a stable family, losing the one he had created was like being pulled back into the shadows he thought he had left behind. Their divorce wasn't dramatic or scandalous. There were no tabloid blow-ups or public arguments. Instead, there was quiet sorrow and a private kind of grief that didn't make headlines but was no less profound. In later interviews, Seal remained respectful, admitting that love can change and people can grow apart, even when they don't want to. But beneath his composed demeanor, it was evident he was mourning more than just a relationship. Heidi later admitted the marriage wasn't always ideal but refused to expose the details of their challenges to the public. She said, "People don't need to know who did what. I don't want to talk positively or negatively about the ups and downs that we had. Every couple goes through things. Unfortunately, we're in the public, so the highs are out there, but I don't think it's necessary, especially for our children, to have the lows being printed in magazines and talked about." After the divorce, Seal led a quieter life. He didn't rush into another celebrity relationship or showcase new romances in the media. Instead, he focused on the one thing that still gave his life purpose: his children. Parenthood became his foundation. He stayed actively involved in their lives, sharing custody with Heidi and working hard to nurture strong, meaningful connections with each of his kids. He often spoke about how deeply fatherhood mattered to him and how crucial it was to remain a consistent presence in his children's lives, even as the dynamics of the family changed. Like many divorced parents, he faced the complexities of co-parenting. There were whispers of disagreements between Seal and Heidi concerning travel plans, custody decisions, and differing lifestyle choices. Once committed to the idea of a united home, Seal now had to manage shared holidays, different households, and new daily rhythms. Heidi eventually moved on and married German musician Tom Kaulitz, while Seal kept his personal life mostly out of the public eye. In 2021, he was reportedly dating his former assistant, Laura Strayer, but there were no new marriages or significant relationship milestones. Over time, it seemed Seal turned inward, opting for solitude over the vulnerability of love. The emotional strain from the divorce left a visible mark. Though he continued making music and performing, something had changed. He became quieter and more reserved. The same man who once sang love songs so passionately now carried a guarded tone in interviews, a trace of sorrow just beneath the surface. His focus remained on being a father. He was frequently seen spending time with his children, going on trips, attending their games, and making special memories. Despite the hurdles of co-parenting, he made it clear that his kids would always come first. Still, the loss of the united family he had envisioned didn't prepare him for the loneliness that came with this new chapter of life. Once upon a time, Seal's voice echoed through arenas, surrounded by cheering fans and flashing cameras. But now, at 62, those vibrant moments have faded into a much quieter existence. In 2017, he released his last full album, Standards, a collection of timeless classics he had loved growing up. These songs, about love, loss, and hope, resonated with Seal's own emotional style. After that, he didn't rush back to the studio or try to compete with younger artists. Instead, he stepped back, choosing his performances carefully and limiting collaborations. The music industry had evolved, new stars were rising on platforms like TikTok, and attention spans had shortened. But Seal didn't chase trends or fame. He made it clear he wasn't interested in streams or going viral. Gradually, the spotlight shifted away, and he found himself in a quieter place. At the same time, his health was presenting its own challenges. Living with lupus since his 20s had never been easy. The facial scars were just a glimpse of what he endured daily: fatigue, joint pain, and inflammation. As he moved into his 50s and now 60s, these symptoms became more difficult to manage. Performing, once effortless, became draining. Long tours took a toll, recovery was slower, and even his voice required extra care. His voice, his gift, now needed protection. He had to conserve his energy and could no longer push through pain like he once did. For someone who had always poured everything into his performances, slowing down wasn't just a physical adjustment, it was an emotional one. In a time when constant online presence is the norm, Seal chose a different path. He withdrew from social media, avoided interviews, and stayed far from publicity stunts or comebacks. Instead, he embraced a quieter, more personal rhythm, focusing on music at his own pace. But stepping out of the limelight isn't easy, especially for someone who once lived in its center. Letting go of that recognition can feel like losing a piece of your identity. Seal has admitted that the transition was hard. When your name, voice, and image once meant so much to so many, it's jarring to feel forgotten. The same fame that had opened doors now made ordinary life feel distant. The emotional burden of that change was significant. On top of that, his ongoing battle with anxiety made him retreat further from public life. Still, he isn't resentful. He understands the world evolves, though he often feels like an artist from a bygone era, when music was about emotion, not algorithms. Music has always been his sanctuary, a way to express what words alone couldn't. But without the constant adrenaline of live shows, the weight of those emotions became heavier. Still, Seal is far from forgotten. Many devoted fans still stand by him, wishing him happiness and peace. He continues to sing, not just because it's his job, but because it's essential to his emotional survival. The world may not roar his name like before, but his voice still holds power and meaning. His life today may be more subdued, but in many ways, it carries deeper strength. After all, some of the most meaningful victories happen quietly. What do you think? Should Seal step back into the spotlight? Share your thoughts in the comments.